Hello, and welcome back to the Punt Intended podcast, a Dynasty fantasy basketball podcast and a sports ethos production presented by FanDuel. As always, I am your host, Mark C., the Dynasty leader over at Sports Ethos. On today's episode, the NBA season is finally back. Of course, we have to hit on some early season standouts, and we will hit on those players, a couple of players. And then we'll move into continuing our Division Dynasty Outlook with the Pacific Division today. Are the Lakers just going to be Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves and LeBron James whenever he comes back to play? Are the Clippers' old heads going to gel this season? And is that going to be enough to lead to sustainable fantasy production for all of the players involved in that team? Are the Suns exploding, imploding? Whatever term you want to say, as just spontaneously combusting, and there's not going to be actually great dynasty value here? Are the Kings just going to be the train wreck that we think they're going to be? And on the Golden State Warriors, yes, they look awesome to start the season. And is it finally going to be Jonathan Kuminga time there? We'll get to all these questions and more. First, a little bit of housekeeping. You can find me over on Blue Sky at Mark C. Sports Ethos and on Twitter at MacAttack145. My Dynasty writings and rankings can be found at sportsethos.com with an NBA Fantasy Pass subscription. Also, with that subscription, you will get access to our subscriber Discord, where we are constantly helping people with their redraft questions. I am consistently posting my Dynasty thoughts, ramblings, helping you out with specific advice to your team. Feel free. You can dump all your team information there. Give me all your detailed questions. I will address them and look at your team and help you out wherever you need it, or even if it's a simple surface question. That's where I've been putting some of my game notes for all the game film that I've been consuming too. So you'll get those insights and more with that NBA Fantasy Pass subscription. But now let's get into some of these early season standout players that we've seen so far. And I do hammer this a lot. I do stress, do not overreact to just the stats for the early season games. We're talking a 3-game sample max for these players. We'll note I'm recording this on the morning of, this is October 25th, Saturday. So 2 days ago from when this episode will be out. But I mean, you're talking 3 games max for these players? You cannot draw any substantial conclusions yet. What you can look at is, how are players approaching the game differently? Are they already absorbing more usage? Are they taking more threes? Are they maybe passing a bit more within the flow of the offense? And then especially just with the eye test, do they look more attentive on defense? Is the pace of the game more suited to them? Are they adjusting themselves to the pace of the game? I think a really good example of a player who has stood out and stood out well from a process standpoint that could maybe continue throughout the season is Kyshawn George of the Washington Wizards. He looks more involved in the offense. He's getting to his spots nicely. The defensive stats are flashing through with that length and that size and just making stuff happen on that end of the court. Do I trust that he's going to shoot? I think it's 60% for the rest of the season. Of course not. Those percentages, of course, aren't going to hold. But still, process-wise, everything looks on track for him to have at the very least, a solid involvement in this offense while chipping in those rebounds, those steals, those blocks, those assists, and giving you stats all across the board. I'll admit, I have been lower on Kyshawn George than a lot of people in the community. And even here at Sports Ethos, where Keston Paul, great writer, read his work, has been needling me a little bit and asking, why are you lower on Kyshawn George? Like, what's up with that? And, if he continues this play, I'll have to put my hands up and say I was wrong, and Kyshawn George is showing himself to be a key part of this Wizards rebuild. Another player that has stood out for me early on is Jonathan Kuminga. And it seemed, we are talking about the Warriors later in this pod, but we're going to talk about Jonathan Kuminga up front here. I mean, it seemed like a perfect storm for him not to contribute well, right? You had a pretty tenuous contract negotiations. Seemed like Kuminga wanted no part of this team. Didn't really feel like the Warriors were invested in him at all, besides the trade chip and matching salary. They came to this agreement that, yeah, this contract didn't really scream, we believe in you long term. And yet, he has been starting games. He looks more attentive on the defensive end in his assignments. He is actually passing better within the flow of the offense and just making those recognitions a little quicker. And he looks like a good connective player out there and doing those things that help you win basketball games. And because of that, he is earning more minutes in the rotation. And then his natural scoring capabilities are allowed to shine through. And that's exactly, those are exactly the sorts of things that if you were a Jonathan Kuminga believer, you were hoping to see. And yeah, I mean, we'll have to see if it continues. It's a 3-game sample, but I mean, so far the early returns have been very positive on Jonathan Kuminga, and if this keeps up, he will be a big riser in my dynasty rankings. With those two players, those are the two players that have really stood out to me. I have tons of notes of all the other game film on lots of other players, but I think these two players are emblematic of the sorts of things that I look for in these early games of the season, and what will change my dynasty thoughts on them. With that, let's get to the first team in the Pacific, not the first place team in the Pacific Division, but rather the first team that we will talk about in the Los Angeles Lakers. So let's go ahead and share their depth chart here on the screen. And in a way, I mean, this is, I think, a pretty not complicated team. I think simplistic team for Dynasty. I mean, they're pretty top heavy, and then it gets to role player territory pretty fast here. Luka Doncic, top of the list here. He's been on fire to start the season. And I think it's somewhat reflected in his MVP odds via FanDuel. His odds as of 10/25 are plus 500, fourth best in the league. I feel like it's more reflective of his team state and probably the Lakers not being as competitive as other teams more than his actual play, because he has been dominating in the mid-range, doing everything for this team, looking great, even looking a little more engaged on the defensive end, which I'm not saying he's a defensive stopper, but at least just doing your job capably enough goes a long way. Long way of saying Luka Doncic is a locked-in top 5 dynasty asset and has looked amazing and is going to have so much usage on this team. And don't forget about Austin Reeves in that role as well. He looked very capable playing as I don't want to say backup primary initiation option, but a complementary initiation option on the offense once Luka Doncic got there. And we've seen that already translate here at the beginning of this season. So Reeves, I think, is locked into this nice usage role, going to put up plenty of counting stats at pretty solid efficiency for teams. And there's no reason to doubt Austin Reeves as this type of talent going forward for the next few seasons. I mean, sure, maybe things change when LeBron James comes back from his sciatica. Maybe Father Time has finally called LeBron James up and said, "Hey, buddy, I've been not coming to your door a lot lately, but now the bills come due a little bit." Maybe. I think either way, Reeves is set for a solid role. LeBron James, as a big fan of his game and watching him for so many years, I'm hoping this isn't the end. I don't think it's the end, but we'll have to wait and see when he comes back. I think assuming he comes back healthy, though, he will see that similar role and usage as we saw, albeit maybe a little less on-ball reps as he manages just his age and the injuries that are cropping up now. Talking about some of the ancillary players here. Yeah, I mean, DeAndre Ayton's been a little bit frustrating player so far. At the same time, I mean, he is completely locked into minutes at center here because the Lakers have not literally zero options, but kind of essentially zero other options at big right now. Ayton just needs to do the big man stuff. Just Do that, you will put up production, you'll be a starter, you have the size and physicality to do so if you apply himself. But been a little mixed so far early. I'd still say patient, but treat him as a fringe starter for a long-term role. But hopefully he starts putting up more production here now. I mean, because look at the centers behind DeAndre Ayton here. Jackson Hayes is just kind of an energy rim running big who kind of sometimes looks JaVale McGee-ish out there, just in terms of maybe not being the most coordinated and doing a lot of silly stuff. Maxi Kleber doesn't seem to be healthy. He seems to be way past his prime now. Koloko is pretty buried on the depth chart. So you got Ayton and maybe some Hayes here and there for your bigs. The other starter has been, or one of the other starters rather, has been Rui Hachimura, who I think is a capable forward option. Hit some threes, grab some rebounds, not hurt your field goal percentage too much. Has a cap ceiling just because he doesn't do much on a permanent basis, but he's going to see plenty of minutes on this team. If you need a depth forward, yeah, that's Rui Hachimura for you there. Marcus Smart has been coming off the bench early. I mean, he's been okay, but he does not have the juice offensively anymore. And I called him fool's gold pretty much as soon as that signing was made from his buyout on the Wizards. I said that he isn't going to contribute that much. He just doesn't have that sort of energy and juice anymore. And just because he's on the Lakers, where they have some rotation gaps, doesn't mean that he can just instantly produce. And I think so far that's been the case. Marcus Smart is just good minutes, but not going to do much for your fantasy teams. And I think you can say the same for Gabe Vincent, who is starting, but he is kind of just a dude. So if you need a dude on your team just to fill some guard minutes, sure. But there has to be someone out there better in your dynasty leagues than Gabe Vincent and Marcus Smart. I did say, going to the rest of the forward rotation now, did say Jake LaRavia was a shrewd acquisition for this team. He's been seeing, about 20, 25 minutes a game early on here. Hasn't exactly produced all too well. I think those numbers will stabilize a little bit, but you are talking, again, a depth forward here who is just not super enticing on a permanent basis. He needs to get those minutes, and LaRavia needs to get those minutes to really start racking up juicy stats for your fantasy team. Connect's been buried early. Makes sense. I mean, he's mainly just threes, but he doesn't hurt you. Just doesn't do anything else elsewhere. Bad defensively. And clearly does not have the trust of JJ Redick and this coaching staff here. Jared Vanderbilt has been playing a decent amount early. He's good in defensive stats. He's good there, but man, is his offense completely woeful and just bad black hole. Teams aren't guarding him. He's doing absolutely nothing to punish that lack of attention. I'm glad that he's back. Seems healthy enough, but mainly just a straight defensive specialist. We're probably a year away from Adu Thiero actually contributing, although he is the sort of player I think that could easily supplant Jake LaRavia or Jared Vanderbilt or Gabe Vincent or Marcus Smart or any of these fringe rotation options on this team. Thiero does have a nice blend of downhill driving, making stuff happen on defense. The iffy shooting is the question mark long term, but I do like Adu Thiero's mold. I like his per minute potential contributions with steals, with some blocks, with some good field goal percentage help. And I think he can at least make stuff happen out there, and that's usually a positive sign for fantasy production later on. Just because Adu Thiero is injured now, in the G League now, and will probably take some time to ramp up, I would make sure you don't forget the name. And that's the Lakers. As I said, top heavy, and it's the fringe of okay rotation options. So moving from the Lakers, we will go to the other team in Los Angeles now, the LA Clippers. And the Clippers are going to be one of the older rotations you see in the NBA. And because it's a lot of established players, it does make the Dynasty Outlook I mean, it makes it a little boring to talk about because we kind of know what a lot of these players are. James Harden is going to be in a sizable on-ball role yet again, giving you plenty of assists, a little mixed scoring, but still the volume of points is going to be great, and someone you can rely on for the next, I'd say, season or two at least. Kawhi Leonard, kind of the same deal. We'll have to see how the off-court stuff works out, but at least for this season, I think he's going to be fine. I mean, definitely fine from a contract and punishment standpoint. Obviously, the health is a constant worry for Kawhi Leonard, but you know what you're going to get out of him when he does play, and that's going to be very, very high-end per game contributions. Bradley Beal does slot in here somewhat in that Norm Powell role from last year. We haven't seen him get those shots up too heavily early on. I think, we said at the top, there are a number of new names on this team. It's going to take some time for all of this to gel together. So be patient. I do think Beal can provide some decently efficient points as the season progresses, but it's going to be probably a little more variable than you like and a little less trustworthy in that department than you would prefer. But I still like his fit on this team. Of course, you have Chris Paul, the point guard on the bench here. He's going to get you plenty of assists. It's just his scoring has gone down so much, and it's really not needed on this team. He doesn't need to get into his mid-range bag of tricks, really. He can just set up the offense, provide that capable, steady play, which they kind of need that. I mean, Bradley Beal isn't really a setup point guard. Kawhi Leonard, you don't want to bring the ball up and down the court every time. So Chris Paul should slot in, fill those duties, provide some defense. If you just need some cheap assists and steals, Chris Paul is going to give you that. I thought that Chris Dunn might get buried a little bit with all these guards in the building, but so far they are needing his defense. He's playing still at least about 20 minutes per game so far. And with that, that is enough time for him to give you some of these complimentary steals and a little bit of assists and other goodies along the way. So if you need that depth option, you need those stats. I think Chris Dunn is going to be just fine for minutes this season. Bogdan Bogdanovic is going to be in that shooter role. I think he'll get up plenty of threes, but because there are other players better on the ball than him, probably not getting too many on-ball reps, talking more just a straight threes player from Bogdan Bogdanovic, and that's when he's healthy. Looks like Derrick Jones Jr. is retaining his starting spot in the lineup for now. And I've loved what Derrick Jones Jr. has made himself and developed as a player these past couple seasons. As this lengthy defender, very capable on ball with the length to get deflections and steals and some off weak side blocks coming in for help. And a capable enough shooter, not anything crazy, but a capable enough shooter. And that makes him a very roto style friendly player where you'll get not plenty of stats, but nice little stats across the board here and there. Derrick Jones Jr. will rarely pop off in box scores, rarely. But if you just start him every game as a depth option, I think you'll come to appreciate what he provides, and that will be reflective. End of the season, it'll probably be around 200th on a per game basis in Basketball Monster, and yeah, if you're in a deeper league, you do appreciate that sort of production from Derrick Jones Jr. Let's look at the center rotation now, where it's already been interesting early on. Ivica Zubac is obviously still the starter. And he was probably my flagship dynasty buy last year. And I think he well outpaced expectations, even my expectations last season. But now they brought in Brook Lopez. They have John Collins who can maybe play some center. Hasn't yet, but could. And we've already seen Zubac's minutes dip a little bit. Now, granted, again, recording this on October 25th, Saturday. In the two games, one of them being a blowout, Zubac has only played about 26, 27 minutes per game, which is that's about 5 less minutes per game. And yeah, your stats and production just cannot be the same if you're playing 5 less minutes a game. Now, I think maybe that stabilizes, maybe that doesn't. But I mean, Brook Lopez is a very, very solid backup center. And I think it's one that the Clippers are going to play this season, obviously. So is Zubac a sell high in Dynasty? You can't do that now, as people have already seen his minutes. I think he'll be fine. I think he will settle at more 28, 30 minutes per game. And I think he'll be fine on a permanent basis. But the volume of minutes will be lower. The volume of stats will be lower for Ivica Zubac. And then consequentially, Brook Lopez will be your capable backup option, giving some boards, some threes, some blocks, kind of what we've seen from him the past couple of years, albeit in a smaller role. John Collins is seeing about mid-20s off the bench right now, which is plenty for his all-around contributions to play. I kind of thought his play would decline in Utah the past couple seasons, and then he would kind of fade off as a more backup forward. Turns out his play has actually, I think, solidified in Utah the past couple seasons, proving me wrong. And I said he was a very quality addition to this team. I think we're already seeing that. We're already seeing him produce nicely in his role. And I think that will just continue to happen over the season and in seasons to come. Lastly, do want to touch on Yannick Conan Niederhauser here. He's probably just an energy third big, but be on the watch if Brook Lopez starts to falter over the course of the season and Yannick Conan Niederhauser can get a little bit more run in this lineup and rotation. Let's go now to the Phoenix Suns. And I mentioned at the top, is this a team that is potentially going to not explode in a good way, explode in a negative way, implode, combust, whatever Suns do? I don't actually know. I can't say I know the science of Suns, but it's been a little mixed for the Suns early on here. And I think that is going to be the case over the course of the season. Partially because Devin Booker is back to this high usage playmaking. And that did sound more like a dig at Devin Booker. I think he can be a capable enough playmaker, but he's not the guy you want as your do-it-all, everything guy. He is a little mediocre in that department, not the most incisive passer, and can have a propensity for turnovers when he starts accelerating that passing usage, which we've already seen. That said, you'll get plenty of scoring. You'll still get those volume of assists, and you'll still get efficient scoring at that. But for fantasy, it's good. For the Suns, not so good. I think we'll leave it there. Some have pointed to, Jalen Green is going to have to absorb so much scoring usage on this team and maybe even increase his playmaking. And as someone who is a fan of the Rockets and has watched Jalen Green for 4 straight years before this, I can tell you he's had plenty of chances to increase his passing. Opportunity was never the issue for Jalen Green. It's that his assist and assist rate have pretty much stayed the exact same over his 4 seasons in the league. So you're telling me now that he actually has usage and opportunity and he's on a different team that's suddenly going to get better? I mean, I said that now that he actually has opportunity and usage, he's always had opportunity and usage. I think we do know the style and the mold of player that Jalen Green is. So maybe we see refinements within those scoring areas. I don't think we see any new development in that passing department. So maybe that means Jalen Green is more of a free throw boost, points and threes player, but I don't think you're getting those assists or boards or steals or anything like that from Jalen Green. Let's go over to the centers now, where Mark Williams is still ramping up from injury and still getting adjusted. What? I remember seeing those reports and blurbing it and being a little shocked because really, you've had the offseason to recover and yet you still need ramp up period. You still look limited and some nebulous ramp up injury reporting. I don't know what's going on with Mark Williams. I would think that he's minutes ramp up and he becomes the clear-cut starter, but it's not the case right now. And obviously, if he's only playing, 20, 22 minutes a game max, it's not enough to trust him as a starter for your team and as a core piece of your center as on any fantasy team. And Oso Ighodaro has been the one starting in his stead. Now, Oso Ighodaro does have some ball skills, but he is a little undersized as a center. And so he's been putting up fine production. I think pretty capable depth production. Been very useful to me in the 30-team salary league so far. 30-team salary dynasty league so far. But Ighodaro is more of a rotation player, but it's good to see him get those opportunity and those minutes early on here. And currently, Common Malawach and Nick Richards are splitting more of that third big depth role. And no, we warned you all. I think we had Braxton on, and Braxton and I, we warned you all that, yeah, you know what? Malawach may not get that early season opportunity right away. And I know a lot of people said, well, they drafted Malawach high. Of course he's going to supplant Mark Williams. Of course he's going to be given the opportunity. I mean, my eyes and box score says otherwise. It says they're easing him slowly and watching him build up. Maybe later in the season, we see him get more adjusted. But early on, there's just not much to say right now. And I think I would have said that before, that Malawach was on track to be brought in very slowly. And you're going to have to be patient with him if you drafted and rostered him. I'm hopeful Rasheer Fleming can push for a spot in this kind of forward center rotation because I love his defensive potential. I love his just size and tenacity, but probably a player that gets eased in over the season and will take a little bit of time to adjust to the pace of the NBA. And then the rest of this team is just a host and a bunch of these middling vet wing options and maybe some younger options like Ryan Dunn, but it's just a host of these middling off-ball or defensive first players. You got Grayson Allen, Dylan Brooks, we mentioned Ryan Dunn, Royce O'Neal, who are all, I think, shades of similar player types. Now, Grayson Allen has been starting for the Suns with Jalen Green out and actually been providing a nice steady hand there so far. So, yeah, I mean, if you just want capable combo guard play, yeah, look at Grayson Allen. If you want a player who is going to be willing to shoot a lot at varied efficiency, maybe get you some steals, get you some boards, you can look at Dylan Brooks. I roster him in a 30-team league for that specific reason because, yeah, like I know he's going to get minutes for his defense. I may not start him a lot of weeks, but if I have injuries hit, I don't mind placing Dylan Brooks in my lineup if I have to. He's a good kind of injury insurance player in Dynasty. Ryan Dunn is starting on this team as well. Defense is showing pretty nicely. Rebounds are there, which is great to see him get more involved on that end. But the shooting is what's going to be the question here for Ryan Dunn. He's getting the volume up, but it's got to hit eventually for me to trust him more as a long-term starter. And then Royce O'Neal is Royce O'Neal, again, going to put up some shots, get you a little bit of boards, a little bit of assists. And that's Royce O'Neal for you. Some other deeper players or deeper names on this team. Colin Gillespie. Yeah, I mean, fine, stabilizing point guard. Think he's rather low upside, but I don't know. Maybe he does just continue to see tick because he is a capable passer and he is a capable shooter. And those things tend to get you minutes. Kobe Brea was a lights-out shooter in college, but may not be able to handle the athleticism of the NBA. I could see him pushing for minutes if that shooting translates, but you're only getting threes from him at the end of the day. And then Jordan Goodwin, he's a fun spark plug point guard, but very much a depth option. One of those energy guys who get that steal or get that charge and hypes up the arena and then kind of muted production otherwise. Yeah, I mean, that's already 3 teams on this pod. Kind of talk about 3 older teams, 3 teams that I think are decently established in terms of their pecking order. And all of that is leading to the Sacramento Kings here. And I want to say hot mess alert because, I mean, we'll go into detail why, but you all know why. or hot mess alert. The Kings are fully back to the Kangs here. I'm like, they signed Russell Westbrook. Like, are you kidding me here? And it's not that I hate Russell Westbrook. Actually, I do very much think he should have been signed by some team as a energy depth guard who can get into the lane and be athletic and provide some defense. But he is not a fit on this Kings team. Heck, I thought Dennis Schroeder wasn't a good fit on this Kings team, and the Kings went out of their way to navigate the cap and sign him to this team. And then they added Russell Westbrook to this guard fold. I mean, but let's get into the clearest players here on the Kings first. Zach LaVine is going to be the sufficient scoring option. I think with all these guards in the room, that his assists are going to be a little capped, but he is just a damn professional bucket getter, and that's what you'll get from Zach LaVine. DeMar DeRozan, I think, is pretty similar in that regard. You won't get the threes, but you'll get some points, some free throw percentage boost, and that'll play. That'll play in a lot of leagues still, even at his age, even on this situation in the Kings. Domantas Sabonis is already back healthy after dealing with a hamstring injury early on. Look, I mean, we know what he is. It's not the most dynamic scorer, but will still give you reliable points. Gets you oodles of rebounds, will get you some assists. And with his contract, should be locked into a high minutes role for the next couple of seasons. Behind Sabonis, I mean, you got a combo of Dario Saric and Drew Eubanks. Kind of just bodies there, not really too intriguing from Dynasty at all. Maxime Reynaud is the name that would be more intriguing, but it looks like he's not going to get that run early on. Again, that's a very common thing for rookies. They take time to adjust, and you got to be patient with them and know that their time hopefully comes and they get a chance later in the season. Maxime Reynaud, I think, could be that player for that more complementary offense next to Sabonis and providing more shooting into this lineup, but it's not going to happen right away. Going to some deep league sicko stuff here, I actually like Dylan Cardwell as his kind of this old school beefier center type who can just gobble up rebounds and not really give you much else. He's listed here as power forward on court depth. He's more of a center because he doesn't shoot, doesn't have that ball handling skills, but he is a little undersized. But hey, it's a deeply sicko stash. Look at Dylan Cardwell for boards, potentially. Let's get to now the guard room here. Dennis Schroeder is going to start, give you some points, give you some assists. And I think I either wrote or said this somewhere last year or 2 seasons ago, but Schroeder's just a type of point guard who is going to bounce around the league, still see a sizable role, though, which means you're still going to get points and assists. And while he feels like you can't trust him long-term, I would have said that 2 years ago, that you can't trust him long-term, but I think he just will find roles in the league and keep producing. So keep rolling with him as long as he's seeing this sort of role in usage. Keon Ellis, we'll get to Keon Ellis in actually, we'll discuss Keon Ellis here now. I mean, I don't think the Kings realize what they have in him because they're only playing him about 15, 18 minutes a game, but he is a capable shooter, more than capable shooter, I'd say. He's an excellent defensive player and makes stuff happen, and you would think he fits well around these other players. But right now, he is getting marginalized for your Russell Westbrooks, for your Malik Monks. And I think to really see Keon Ellis get back to the peak of his fantasy production when he saw those 30 minutes per game, it's probably going to need a trade out of here. Malik Monk has been looking good early on as a scorer, but he isn't getting those assist opportunities as he was previously. I mean, it's very clear the Kings do not think of Malik Monk as a point guard, as a lead initiator. He's not going to get these assist opportunities. That's going to be Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook's job, and then Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis. So a lot of sad trombone noses here for Malik Monk and his passing. Scoring and shooting, that might be there. Assists, not so much. And that means, Russell Westbrook will get some assists, get some boards. do his thing. Guess it's fine for depth point guard. Now we can have even louder, sad trombone noises here for Devin Carter. Wah, wah, wah. Because he is just completely excised from the rotation here early on. There's already been reports that they're looking to move on from him, that he's not going to be in the rotation. And I get it. I mean, he had a rough first season, but he was coming back from a torn labrum injury. What did you expect Carter to do coming back from that? You drafted him. I know it was a new regime, an older regime that drafted him 2 drafts ago with the 13th overall pick. But come on, you got to at least give him a shot, right? He can't be that bad in practice. As someone who traded for Devin Carter as a buy low this offseason, I am not feeling great about rostering him at that cost, but I'm going to be patient, and I hope he does get a chance to show, at least show if he's worthy of minutes or not. Can we at least see that, Kings, please? I think someone who is going to benefit from the rotation here is Nick Clifford, because we haven't mentioned Keegan Murray yet, who is out a few weeks with this UCL injury. Keegan Murray is a solid, reliable defender, albeit middling defensive stats for fantasy. But the usage ceiling is just so capped. I think he could do more in offense, both in terms of just getting shots up and getting threes up off ball. But the offense just doesn't flow like that. And while I think Keegan Murray is still a solid dynasty asset, there's only so many years you can say, trust the talent, trust the talent, trust the talent. And as that talent isn't producing, at some point you kind of hop off that wagon a little bit. I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I'm saying I understand why it's hard to buy in on him for Dynasty. But going back to Nick Clifford now, who has some early season opportunity with Keegan Murray sidelined. I think he's shown that he can chip in across the board all around. That was the sort of player I profiled him as and scouted him as someone who could provide across the board contributions. And I think he'll get those chances if he sees minutes. And I think he has to play, because what size do the Kings have? Seriously, what playable defensive size do the Kings have? They had like Russell Westbrook guarding Lauri Markkanen the other day. It was either Russell Westbrook or Malik. I believe it was Russell Westbrook guarding Lauri Markkanen, which is just, you're asking for threes to get rained in over his head. And that's not the fault of Russell Westbrook. It's just an inherent size disadvantage. Nick Clifford can help a little bit in that department. I think he can get some minutes. And we talked about Devin Carter being a pick of the former regime and not getting minutes. Nick Clifford was a pick of this regime and one that they traded for. So with that line of thinking, it means that Nick Clifford should get minutes, I think, early on and get a chance to produce. All right, let's get to the last team here in the Pacific Division, in the Golden State Warriors. Let me pull them up here real quick. And Golden State Warriors, good old Warriors, who have, I think, been looking really solid early on here. And of course, part of that is Stephen Curry just continuing to look amazing even at his age. I think the Warriors have done a really good job with their additions around him, setting him up for success, not putting too much offensive usage on his plate. But obviously, Curry can kick it into gear when asked. With Jimmy Butler now in the fold with that contract, I'm not worried about the games missed for Jimmy Butler. So many players miss games nowadays that the occasional rest for Jimmy Butler isn't as great an issue. He's clearly producing extremely well with the Warriors. He looks satisfied as far as we know. He's not going to be resting like he was in the Heat last year. And yeah, he's someone I have drafted, I think, at a way above draft slot cost, because he just falls and falls and falls because he might rest some games, which players don't these days, because he might get unhappy. I mean, he's not going to be unhappy this season. So I'm a fan of Jimmy Butler short term and what he will bring and what he will produce for this team. Now, my initial notes on the Warriors were that Draymond Green and Al Horford would be the big man here. and just provide stats across the board. And, they're older and aging, but decent contributions across the board. Draymond Green is doing that, albeit muted scoring, because his scoring has fallen off dramatically these past few seasons. But you're still getting those minutes and the Draymond Green production. Al Horford, on the other hand, it's been said that the Warriors' plan is to limit him to about 20 minutes per game and not play on back-to-backs. So, yeah, you can't really trust Al Horford with that sort of minutes. And that has opened the door for Jonathan Kuminga to step in that starting role and show what we talked about at the top of the pod. The capable defense, the capable complementary connective wing skills, allowing that scoring to shine. And so Jonathan Kuminga is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary of Al Horford being managed over the course of the season. And he should then, he being Jonathan Kuminga, should have that chance to maybe prove all his truthers true finally after 4 rough seasons. With Al Horford missing games, Quinn Post and Trace Jackson Davis should absorb those backup minutes. However, I think we're talking very sparse minutes over the course of the entire season. And at the end of the day, these are probably more bit players long-term for Dynasty than players who are going to merge even in the 20-plus minute per game players. And that just makes it hard to trust them long-term. Brandon Podziemski is starting for the Warriors, but it's been a mixed bag, and I think it's been a mixed bag for him for a little bit of time now. I think he struggled really ramping that scoring usage up, part of his athletic limitations, part of just a more limited dribbling and creation profile. And I think he can shoot well off ball. You need to see him get those volume of shots up to truly be impactful in threes. But he'll give you some threes, can give you some steals. I don't think there is another tier, though, to his game in terms of points and assists. And so treat him as more of a capable across-the-board guy, not some future guy who can blossom for your dynasty squads. Moses Moody here, currently still injured, but can provide some capable wing play, but it is more in that depth mold. Buddy Hield will be that three-point bomber off the bench. I said for years, I think he's been one of the most underrated three-point shooters in the past, 10 seasons, frankly. I get he does have some defensive foibles, but I think Buddy Hield is just a very solid three-point shooter and will provide that for this team. And that means for your fantasy squads, I don't know if you can trust him on a nightly basis, but if you play him, 3 or 4 games, you'll get 2.5 threes on average. Otherwise, you've got, the muted 3 and or D wings that we talked about. You got Moses Moody, Gary Payton II, great defensive player, but you're not really getting great fantasy production from him. Maybe Pat Spencer works his way into the rotation some. Alex Tui is more of a defensive specialist, but muted offense. But so far, the apple of Steve Kerr's eye has been Will Richard. I mean, he's been the 8th, 9th man, which, being a second-round pick is a pretty good return so far if you drafted him in Dynasty. Maybe you get some threes and some steals from him. I think that's really all you get from him. But if he does solidify a greater rotation role, then that's a player that can get you to the, approaching 200th on a per game basis, which, it's not impressive, but it is something if you're in deeper dynasty leagues. Just keep an eye on Will Richard for this rotation. And that will do it for the Pacific Division here. I think this was, that does round out this division. It is a simpler division to talk about with the age of these teams and just the profiles of these players, but still a lot of interesting things to watch for. As we talked about and highlighted throughout this pod. On next week's episode, we'll continue bringing you some of those early season standouts, and we will conclude with we'll get teams like the Rockets, the Grizzlies in there, the Mavericks, very interesting teams here early on the season. And of course, San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper. How have they looked? That's what's going to be stored on next week's episode of the Punt Intended podcast. Make sure to be on the lookout for that. And just a reminder, Punt Intended podcast is presented by FanDuel. But be on the lookout next week. Very interesting division to talk about, and we will see you next time.